Hello and welcome. I am doing Charlie's Torah portion this week because he is very ill and he's been incapacitated. He's really not doing well. We don't know exactly what's wrong, but if I could ask you to pray for him, for his recovery, for strength and for healing from Yah. I know he would greatly appreciate that if you would pray for him. So it turns out that I will be doing this year. I did Torah portion Toldot last week, Vayetze this week, and Vayishlach next week. I've actually already recorded Torah portion Vayishlach. After that, if Charlie has recovered enough, he will be doing the Torah portions with Yosef. So these 3 Torah portions concern Yaakov, the ones that I'm doing. Charlie's next 2, which he'll be doing the week after next, Yah willing, will be concerning Yosef. So this Torah portion starts in Genesis 28. It's right after the events, of course, of the Torah portion Toldot, after his mother said to him, listen, your brother's angry with you, he wants to kill you. Wait until his wrath has subsided and come back after a few days. We will see in this Torah portion that is actually not what happens at all. He is with Lavan, with his mother's brother, for 20 years. And the events of him departing, as we saw in Torah portion Toldot, that is the time of Yaakov's trouble when he was exiled from the land, originally the man Yaakov. And we saw what these events that we are seeing in this Torah portion portend the exile of the house of Israel and the house of Judah from the land of Israel, what we are living through right now. So Genesis 28 verse 10 is the first verse in the Torah portion, and it says, and Yaakov went out from Be'er-sheva and went towards Haran. Haran, of course, being the place where Terach ended up, where Abraham went out from, where he was called to go out from. Here Yaakov is going out from Be'er-sheva, where he was living with Yitzchak and his mother Rivka. He came upon a place and stopped over for the night, for the sun had set, and he took one of the stones of that place and put it at his head, and he lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed and saw a ladder set up on the earth, and its top reached to the heavens, and saw angels of Elohim going up and coming down on it. So this is, if you like, a bridge between heaven and earth. We see scripture in the New Testament which alludes to that passage being fulfilled in Yeshua. It says, and see, Yehovah stood above it and said, I am Yehovah, Elohim of Abraham, your father, and the Elohim of Yitzchak. The land on which you are lying, I give it to you and your seed. And your seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and you shall break forth to the west and to the east, to the north and the south, and all the clans of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your seed. Just like was said to Abraham, that all the nations of the earth would be blessed in him. And in part 2 and part 3 of this Torah portion, I'm going to come back to this passage of scripture, and we're going to examine some other things that it can teach us. Things that I know are gifts from Elohim, that there are many people that haven't taken hold of those things. Amazing things to behold that are, I feel, robbed from certain people because of doctrinal considerations, because of misinterpretation or scriptures having been taught to mean something that they don't to people. So if you want a gift from Elohim, wait around until the second and third part, because I really feel that people are missing some vital information in their works and things about Elohim that they just haven't taken hold of. So in this first part, I'm going to read through the Torah portion. I'm not going to bring up all sorts of other scripture from elsewhere in the Bible. We're just going to read through the Torah portion. I'll tell you my thoughts on it, and I will give you at the end of this part a resource so that you can have great study of this Torah portion in depth. So I'm going to cover the Torah portion in the first part, and in the second and third part I'm going to look back at this passage of scripture and at that which a lot of people are yet to take hold of, and perhaps if you have taken hold of this, a greater understanding of that and another perspective on it perhaps. But anyway, verse 15 says, "And see, I am with you and shall guard you wherever you go, and shall bring you back to this land, for I am not going to leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you." Amazing that Elohim tells Yaakov here, I'm going to bring you back to this land. I'm going to be with you. I'm not going to leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you. What an amazing word from Yehovah that Yaakov can rely on. And of course we have many other examples of words from Yehovah that we as Jacob, as Israel, that we can rely on, and that when things seem bad, as they would for Jacob at certain points, when he's going through 20 years at Laban's house, I can imagine if he had not heard this from Yehovah, he might have felt abandoned, or like he didn't really know what was going to go on, what was going to happen next. Certainly what we're going to see next week when he comes back to the land to see his father, certainly he takes hold of what Yehovah is promising to him here, and it is of great reassurance to him. And of course that's how the word of Elohim is for us. If we realize that, if we believe Elohim's words as Yaakov obviously does, we'll see that next week. But we'll see the things that he has to live through in Lavan's house this week. Verse 16 says, "And Yaakov awoke from his sleep and said, Truly Yehovah is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of Elohim, and this is the gate of the heavens." Hashemayim, in Hebrew, heaven is plural. It's Shemayim, im being the masculine plural. "And Yaakov rose early in the morning and took the stone that he had put at his head, set it up as a standing column, and poured oil on top of it. And he called the name of that place Beit El." Okay, he said, how awesome is this place? This is the house of Elohim, and he calls it the house of Elohim. That's what Beit El means. Beit meaning house, like we would have Beit Lechem, or as we would say in English, Bethlehem, actually means the house of bread, Lechem being bread. Here, Beit or Beit, depending on how you pronounce that last letter, different dialects of Hebrew pronounce it differently, but I would pronounce this Beit El. However, the name of that city had been Luz previously. And Yaakov made a vow, saying, "Since Elohim is with me and has kept me in this way that I am going, and has given me bread to eat and a garment to put on, when I have returned to my father's house in peace, and Yehovah has been my Elohim," so he has faith in what he has been told by Yehovah from the off. Yehovah tells him, I'm going to be with you and I'm going to bring you back here. And he says, since this is so, he says, when I have returned to my father's house in peace, because he knows that he is going to. Just like Abraham was looking for a city not built with hands, not having seen that city, here Yaakov is looking to the time when he will return to his father's house, not having seen those events, but just in faith that they will happen. Then this stone which I have set up as a standing column shall be Elohim's house, and of all that you give me, I shall certainly give a tithe. You can translate this as tithe, or you can translate it as tenth. That's what tithe means to you. And if maybe you came up with the Christian church where they were big on tithes and weren't very big on the law, but they were big on tithes, and now you've come out into the Torah world where they're big on the law, they're not so big on giving a tithe to Elohim. If that is a subject that perhaps you think you know about, perhaps you've heard things about, but if that's a subject that you would like a full examination of through what the scriptures say in their totality about the Ma'aseh, then there is a video on the channel called The Ma'aseh. Okay, spelt exactly the same as it is there with the apostrophe, and if you search that, then you will be able to see a thorough examination of those things. Genesis 29 verse 1 says, and Yaakov moved on and came to the people of the land of the east, and he looked and saw a well in the field, and saw 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well they watered the flocks, and a large stone was on the well's mouth. And all the flocks would be gathered there. Then they would roll the stone from the well's mouth and water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place on the well's mouth. Okay, so we're told here simultaneously what Yaakov perceives, and then a little bit more that is true about that situation. So he sees a well in the field, he sees the 3 flocks of sheep, and then we're told objectively this is true. They would roll the stone from the well's mouth. Yaakov at this point is just perceiving what he can see, however. So Yaakov said to them, my brothers, where are you from? And they said, we are from Haran. So he knows now, he's encountered these individuals, and he knows that they are from the place which he is looking for. He is, of course, looking to go to his mother's brother, Lavan. So he asked them, he said to them, do you know Lavan, son of Nahor? And they said, we know him. So he said to them, is he well? Simply the Hebrew word shalom. And they said, shalom. And see, his daughter Rachel is coming with the sheep. And he said, see, it is still high day, not the time for the livestock to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go and feed them. And of course we can see there an allusion to where we are at today. It's not the time for the sheep to be gathered together. If it was, we would be gathered together. Water the sheep and go and feed them. That's what it's the appropriate time for now. But they said, we are not allowed until all the flocks are gathered together, and they have rolled the stone from the well's mouth. Then we shall water the sheep. And we've looked in greater detail at what is happening here in the pictures that it gives us when we have previously studied this Torah portion. So at the end of me going through the account, the end of part 1, I will give you a resource by which you can learn much more. While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. It came to be when Yaakov saw Rachel, the daughter of Lavan, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Lavan, his mother's brother, that Yaakov went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Lavan, his mother's brother. And Yaakov kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. This isn't kind of him going over there and kissing her on the lips and, being inappropriate. This is just something that we see that people do in that culture. We can see it's their culture because we see it recorded in scripture as that happening. We see him go and do the same to Esau next week, for example. And when Yaakov told Rachel that he was her father's relative and that he was Rivka's son, she ran and told her father. So perhaps a little surprised at first, this man, who is this man who comes up and falls upon her neck and kisses her? It's at this point Yaakov tells Rachel, listen, I am your relative. And she runs here, and Charlie looked recently at those who run to give hospitality. In verse 13 it says, and it came to be when Laban heard the report about Yaakov, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. Then he told Laban all these matters. So Laban is, the last time he has seen his sister, she went off with Abraham's servant to be married to someone, and now their son has come to visit. So he runs out to meet him, he embraces and kisses him, and he says to him, you are indeed my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him for a month. So Yaakov has come to Laban's house in exile. We're not exactly sure whether Laban knows that at this point, but if he does know that, and he knows anything about the reason that Yaakov is there, that he's deceived his father, then identifying him as indeed my bone and my flesh would be appropriate. You are like me, in other words. And we will see that Laban is a deceiver. We're told in the text that Laban deceives. Yaakov also deceives. So Yaakov, in his sin, in his exile, has found himself now in a place with somebody who is also a deceiver. And perhaps you could suggest that Yaakov is going to learn lessons when deceived by somebody else about what it is to be deceived. Then Laban said to Yaakov, because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for naught? Let me know, what should your wages be? And when I was reading this, I was thinking back over my own life at how people can be sometimes. He says, because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for naught? Nobody has suggested that at this point, that he should serve him for nothing. But Laban is he's suggesting that is a thought that might be in men's minds, even though nobody has expressed that. And he asks him, what should your wages be? Which is something that I never like when people do to me. How much do you want me to pay you? It kind of puts you in a bit of a funny position, doesn't it? What do you say? What is the righteous thing to do? So when I read this, I can see other people that I have known in my life in the words of Laban, whether or not that was what Laban was actually doing in this circumstance. And Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was lovely of form and appearance. And Yaakov loved Rachel, so he said, let me serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. Now shortly we're going to see that Laban, although he accepts this at this point, he actually gives Yaakov Leah, his daughter. He deceives Yaakov by giving him Leah instead of Rachel. But at this point, the proposition was given to him, I want Rachel. Let me serve you 7 years for Rachel. And Lavan said, it is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to another man. Stay with me. Now, Lavan's purported reasoning, what he tells Yaakov as to why he gives him Leah instead of Rachel, is different. Here, the proposition is made, let me serve you 7 years for Rachel, and he says, well, it's better that I give her to you than another man. Later, he's going to say it's not right to give the younger before the older. That's not what we do in this place. But here, he accepts it on the grounds that it would be better for him to give Rachel now to Yaakov than it would be to give her to another man. So Yaakov served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her. Then Yaakov said to Lavan, give me my wife when my days are completed, and let me go into her. And Lavan gathered all the men of the place and made a feast. And in the morning it came to be that, see, it was Leah. Not sure how that is possible, that it would just be in the morning. Maybe Yaakov had a skinful to drink and he was insensible. We see that with Noach, and we see that with Lot when he is kind of deceived by his daughters into laying with them so that they can bear children to him. So maybe it's something like that. I'm not saying that it is, but it could be. So he said to Lavan, what is this that you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why then have you deceived me? And Lavan said, it is not done this way in our place to give the younger before the firstborn. But we saw just previous that Lavan accepted that Yaakov's terms, and he even gave a reason as to why he would do such a thing, that it was better to give her to Yaakov than it would be to another man, to someone who was of their family. Now, there is also in this deception and this objective wrongdoing by Lavan, there is a lesson for Yaakov here, because he was the younger and Esav was the older, and he deceived his father in order for the younger to receive before the older. Lavan is saying, oh, it's not done in this place. So whether Lavan knows what has happened and he's kind of rubbing Yaakov's face in it, or whether Yaakov is simply experiencing these things, and we could speculate that Yaakov would learn a lesson from this. Well, wait, I find myself in this place, and now I'm having this done to me, and the reason that it's being done is because it's not right to do this. So this thing's linking it to his previous deception. Whether Yaakov twigs makes the link, we're not actually told explicitly, but the possibility is there. Complete the week of this one, then we will give you this one too for the service which you shall serve me still another 7 years. And Yaakov did so and completed her week, a week of years. Then he gave him his daughter Rachel too as wife. So at this point, he's been there 14 years. And Lavan gave his female servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as a female servant. And he also went into Rachel. He also loved Rachel more than Leah. And he served with Lavan still another 7 years. So at this point, we're going to see that Yaakov's wives or his concubines are going to bear children to him. And of course, these are the fathers of the 12 tribes. So first Leah bears 4 children. First Reuven, then Shimon or Simeon, Levi or Levi, Yehudah or Judah. Then she stops bearing, and we're told that Rachel is barren, just like Rivka, just like Sarah. Rachel is barren. She gives her female servant to Yaakov, just like Sarah did with Hagar, so that she could bear Yaakov children. Perhaps this is known history. We can look back on those things and say, well, it wasn't good for Abraham to take Hagar, and look what came of it. But it certainly seems to be something which was acceptable back then, acceptable in their culture, because we see Sarah do it with Hagar. We have the benefit of reading scripture from a distance and saying, well, these are the outcomes of this, and Ishmael and all of his offspring were the outcome, and maybe that wasn't the greatest thing. Yitzchak and his offspring ultimately result in Mashiach, result in the sons of Yaakov, and we can say that's better. Maybe it was known in Yaakov's family that the giving of the maidservant was something which was good. Abraham certainly got another son out of it. The idea that Abraham would have known that it was bad perhaps isn't entirely fleshed out for us in scripture, but regardless, Rachel's servant Bilhah is given to Yaakov, and she bears him 2 children at this point, and they are Dan and Naphtali. Then Leah gives her servant Zilpah to Yaakov. She bears him Gad and Asher, and then Leah becomes pregnant by Yaakov again and bears a final 2 sons. They are Yisachar or Issachar and Zebulun or Zebulun. So Leah has 6 sons, her servant has 2. So that's 8 from Leah's side, if you like. So far, Rachel's side has only borne 2 sons, Dan and Naphtali, but we're told that Elohim remembered Rachel, just like he remembered Noah when he was in the ark. Not that he had forgotten, but he brought him to mind, and he acted for him in that moment. So then Rachel is to bear, and she bears Yosef while they are in Lavan's house. Ultimately, she will bear a final son, which is Binyamin or Benjamin, but that is something that we're going to see in next week's Torah portion. They are not born to him in Lavan's house. In Lavan's house it is just these 11. And it came to be when Rachel had borne Yosef, that Yaakov said to Lavan, "Send me on my way to my own place and to my land. Give my wives and my children for whom I have served you, and let me go, for you yourself know my service which I have done for you." And Lavan said to him, "If I have found favor in your eyes, please stay, for I have diligently watched that Yehovah has blessed me for your sake." And that word for diligently watched means something akin to, I have done divination and I have seen this. But again, what he tells to Yaakov here is different to what he tells him later when Yaakov says to him, "Give me my wives and my children." Here he says, "If I found favor in your eyes, please stay. I know that Yehovah has blessed me for your sake." Later he says, "These are my daughters and my children." And he said, "Name me your wages and I give it." Again, it may sound like some kind of gregarious act. Tell me whatever you would have is your wages and I give it. But to somebody who is righteous and somebody who is honest, this is not an easy question to answer. So what Yaakov does here is quite clever. So he said to him, "You know how I have served you and how your livestock has been with me. For the little you had before had before I came has increased greatly, and Yehovah has blessed you since my coming. But now, when am I to provide for my own house too? And he said, what do I give you? And Yaakov said, give me naught, give me nothing. If you do this for me, I shall again feed and guard your flocks. So Yaakov says something similar to what Abraham said when he was offered the booty from when he had gone to rescue Lot. He says, no, I don't want you to say that you have made me rich. Maybe that was what was in Yaakov's mind. Maybe he knew of what Abraham had said. We don't know. But regardless, he says, don't give me anything. I'm not going to tell you how much wages I want to stay and do good for you. Rather, do this, and I shall again tend your flocks. He says, let me pass through all your flock today, removing from there all the speckled and spotted sheep, and all the black ones among the lambs, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and these shall be my wages. And my righteousness shall answer for me in time to come, when you come concerning my wages. So he puts this very much in Yehovah's hands, because the offspring of the sheep are going to be down to Yehovah. And he says, therefore, let my righteousness answer for me. If I'm going to put it in Yehovah's hands, then if I am righteous, then I will do well. And if I'm not, so be it. Said, my righteousness shall answer for me in time to come, when you come concerning my wages. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats, and black among the lambs, it is stolen if it is with me. So if you find it with me, and it's not one of these ones, I've stolen it from you, and you can treat it accordingly. And Lavan said, see, let it be according to your word. So Lavan is happy with this. And on that day, he set aside the male goats that were speckled and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had some white in it, and the black ones among the lambs, and gave them into the hand of his sons. And he put 3 days' journey between himself and Yaakov fed the rest of Lavan's flocks. And Yaakov took for himself rods of green poplar, and of the almond and the chestnut trees, peeled white stripes in them, and exposed the white which was in the rods. And reading the Hebrew, there's certainly another way to interpret what is written there, which is perhaps instructive to us about all sorts of interesting things. When I give you the resource at the end by which you can learn more about this Torah portion specifically, then you'll be able to look at all of those things. Verse 38 says, and he set the rods which he had peeled before the flocks in the gutters, in the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, and they conceived when they came to drink. So the flocks conceived before the rods, and the flocks brought forth streaked, speckled, and spotted. And Yaakov separated the lambs, and made the flocks face toward the streaked, and all the black in the flocks of Lavan, and he put his own flocks by themselves, and did not put them with Lavan's flock. And it came to be, whenever the strong ones of the flock conceived, that Yaakov placed the rods before the eyes of the flock in the gutters, so they would conceive among the rods. But when the flocks were weak, he did not put them in. So the weak ones were Lavan's, and the strong ones Yaakov's. Again, there's quite a lot to that. Thus the man increased very much, and had many flocks, and female and male servants, and camels and donkeys. So to the eyes of men here, perhaps Yaakov has benefited himself, perhaps even at Lavan's expense, because people who are looking to explain things without reference to Yehovah understand things differently, and we see that in Lavan's sons now. It says, and he heard the words of Lavan's sons, saying, Yaakov has taken away all that was our father's, and from what belonged to our father, he has made all this wealth. Okay, they're not factoring in Yehovah to the equation, and Yaakov would look at the face of Lavan and see that it was not toward him as before. Again, Lavan is seeing what's happening, and to his position, maybe Yaakov is being a bit tricky, especially if he knows that Yaakov is like this, and he does in fact know the reason that Yaakov has come to dwell with him. Maybe he thinks that Yaakov is taking advantage of him, and he's not very happy about it. We tend to see kind of Lavan and Yaakov as bad guy and good guy, but in understanding how humans perceive things, especially when they're not really possessed of a knowledge of Yahovah, then maybe it's a bit more understandable where Lavan is coming from, and we'll see that as we go forward. And Yahovah said to Yaakov, return to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I am with you. Okay, so he has been told now by Yahovah, return. Lavan does not know this, so Lavan's actions now are as if Yaakov has decided to leave after he has agreed to stay. And he's even chosen what his own wages should be, regardless of Lavan's motive in looking at that, which we don't know. But to Lavan's perspective, he has said to Yaakov, name your wages. Whether or not that was him being a bit tricky, we don't know. But to his perspective, I've offered this guy whatever he wants to stay. And Yaakov sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field to his flock, and said to them, I see your father's face, that it is not toward me as before, and the Elohim of my father has been with me. And you know that I have served your father with all my strength. Yet your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. But Elohim did not allow him to do evil to me. So this is how Jacob perceives the situation, seemingly. And he's going to his wives, and he's giving this account of things. We don't know whether Lavan changed his wages for reasonable reasons, for unreasonable, but this is certainly how Yaakov perceives it, and he's saying, Elohim is with me, and Elohim's not allowed him to do evil to me. That may well be true, but he's just coming to his wives, to this man's daughters, and he's saying, your dad's doing this, Elohim's not going to let him do this, basically, come on, let's go. When he said this, the speckled are your wages, then all the flock bore speckled, and when he said this, the streaked are your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked. So Elohim has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. So Lavan's sons have one perspective on this, how those things came about. Yaakov has quite another perspective, and he is telling the sisters of Lavan's sons, those things are not true. It's Elohim who has benefited me. But in this, we can see something that's important for us to take hold of. In a situation, Elohim may well be working in the background, and we might think that he's working for us. Somebody else might think that he's working against us. And the arguments that we can have with people should all be in this context. They should all be with the knowledge that Elohim ultimately is going to judge who is right and who is wrong, and we should always strive to be in the right. We can find ourselves in many situations where we know that what we are doing is the right thing, and yet people misunderstand our actions and think that we are being tricky with them, or whatever else might be. The only way that we can deal with that situation is by always walking in what we know to be right, and to be doing things in the sight of Elohim rather than trying to make things right in the sight of men. Men are always going to misconstrue your actions. Men are always going to conceive, because of the limitations of their perception, the situation in a way that perhaps it's not. But all you can do is act according to what is right before Yehovah. And if he wants to benefit you, as Yaakov seems to think that he has in this situation, and I would say that he has in fact in this situation, Elohim can do that. And if you are acting in a way which is wrong, then you have that knowledge before Elohim, and you can't expect him to act in your favor. Maybe he will act in your favor. That's not a guarantee that you are on the side of right. It's just a good indication that Elohim is working his purposes in your life. So as we see these events develop, bear that in mind, that these two men on the earth are both operating from a limited perspective, and that things between men aren't always black and white. It's not always a case of this person is right and that person is wrong. People, in my experience, don't always act out of just pure malice. Some people do, but generally people don't. Generally people act in the way that they do because they're deceived about something, they misconstrue something. So we should always be gracious with one another and understanding, esteeming someone else more highly than oneself. Always presuming the best of people, for example, is a good way to not fall into a situation where actually Elohim is favoring the other person, but you have no idea because you're operating from a limited perspective of the situation. And it came to be at the time when the flocks conceived that I lifted my eyes and looked in a dream, and saw the rams which leaped upon the flocks were streaked, speckled, and mottled. And the angel of Elohim spoke to me in a dream, saying, Yaakov, and I said, here I am. So Jacob has these dreams in which he sees these angels of Elohim. We saw it at the beginning, the angels of Elohim going up and down on the ladder between heaven and earth. Here he has a dream, and the angel of Yehovah is speaking to him. He says, the angel of Yehovah spoke to me in a dream, saying, Yaakov, and I said, here I am. And he said, lift your eyes now and see, all the rams which leap on the flocks are streaked, speckled, and mottled, for I have seen all that Lavan is doing to you. I am the ale of Beth El, where you anointed the standing column, and where you made a vow to me. Now rise up, get out of this land, and return to the land of your relatives. So he reminds Yaakov of his vow. This is how he relates this to Lavan's daughters, his wives, that Yehovah reminded him of the vow. Bear that in mind in next week's Torah portion, when we see Yaakov going to the land of Canaan, as it is at the time, and deciding to go his own way. But he's relating these events, and he says, Yehovah has said this to me, and it certainly reads to me like Yaakov is kind of emboldened by this, like, I'm the one in the right, they're the one in the wrong. But we'll see as these events develop that perhaps things aren't quite that clear in the situation, and Lavan isn't necessarily doing evil to Yaakov just out of the evil of his heart. And Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, do we still have any portion or inheritance in our father's house? Are we not reckoned by him as strangers? For he has sold us and also entirely consumed our silver. And again, bear this in mind when you are listening to someone else's account of things, that it is just their perception of the events. We don't know why Lavan as they put it, consume their silver. Maybe he was doing it for something that was ultimately to be for their good. And it certainly seems later on that they're not reckoned by Lavan as strangers. He has sold us. Well, there was a bride price to be paid. There was to be agreed. And that is what he sold them for. So it's not absolutely clear that what Lavan is doing is just wickedness all the way through here. This is how these people perceive these events. This is why they're upset with their father. But things might not actually be the way that they perceive. So we should bear that in mind when people come to us, as they will. Not that they should, but people will come to us and relay to us a story of something that is happening in their life, and they'll give it from their perspective. We should bear in mind that there are certain things that they cannot know, and their interpretation of another's behavior is not necessarily the way that things actually are. And of course, for believers, we should remind people that they need to go and speak between them and the other person alone. And then if that doesn't work, go with a witness. Not that you've gone to the witness and you've told the witness everything from your perspective, but you go with that witness so that they are witness of what is said between you and the other party. And that is the way that we should address these things. When we think that somebody has done something against us, we shouldn't speak these things which we see as the truth, but without knowing or having been told by the other person, yes, that is the way that it is. We shouldn't speak as if these things are true. For all the wealth which Elohim has taken from our father and are ours and our children's, now then do whatever Elohim has told you. And Yaakov rose and put his sons and his wives on the camels, and he drove off all his livestock and all his possessions which he had acquired, his property of the livestock which he had acquired in Padan Aram, to go to his father Yitzchak in the land of Canaan. When Lavan had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole the house idols that were her father's. So people, again, we can see they tend to do things kind of emboldened by feeling that they are in the right. Okay, they think, well, he's stolen our silver. And then we see Rachel stealing something of Lavan's. That is something which is wrong. It's something that she shouldn't have done, regardless of how she felt in the situation. And Yaakov deceived Lavan the Aramean because he did not inform him that he was about to flee. So again, he feels emboldened, perhaps. We don't know how Yaakov felt, but we can put ourselves in that situation. I can put myself in that situation and think, well, maybe I would feel justified leaving and not telling Lavan because of all the injustice that he has done to me. Yehovah did not tell him. Deceive Lavan by not informing him that you're about to go. He just said, go to your own land. There's another way to do that, which would be the correct way. Yehovah hasn't told Yaakov to do it in this way, but Yaakov perhaps feels that he should do it in this way. We can see that he is grieved with Lavan, perhaps justifiably, perhaps some things he's misunderstood. His daughters are the same. They're all resolved in their mind that they're going to go, that Lavan is this bad guy. They're going to deceive him. Rachel is going to steal his household gods, which, again, he shouldn't have, but that's no reason for him to be stolen from. So in all these situations, when you find yourself in a situation like that, remember, you don't possess all of the information. You are never justified to act in a way which is wrong because of someone else's wrongdoing. Always esteem them above yourself. Give them the benefit of the doubt and say, you know what, I just don't know why that person has acted in this way. Even though I've got all of this evidence, these people think that they've got evidence too, but really what it amounts to is hearsay and speculation. So always have your ears attuned to those things. Watch out for them in situations. And he fled with all that he had, and he rose and passed over the river and headed toward the mountains of Gilead. And on the third day Laban was told that Yaakov had fled. And he took his brothers with him and pursued him for 7 days' journey, and he overtook him in the mountains of Gilead. But in a dream by night Elohim came to Laban the Aramean and said to him, "Guard yourself that you do not speak to Yaakov either good or evil." So he tells him, it seems he's warning him here, do not speak to Yaakov evil. Interestingly, he also says, do not speak to him good. Okay, don't speak good or evil to Yaakov. Let Yaakov proceed as he is how it reads to me. Then Laban overtook Yaakov. Now Yaakov had pitched his tent in the mountains, and Laban with his brothers pitched in the mountains of Gilead. And Laban said to Yaakov, "What have you done that you have deceived me and driven my daughters off like captives taken with the sword?" So his daughters are saying, he's treating us like slaves. Laban saying, this is how I perceive your actions, that you've run off with my daughters as if you've come and you've taken them captive. Of course, the truth, the objective situation, is something that only Yehovah can perceive. But we have all of these people making accusations against one another. Feelings, tensions are obviously running high in this situation, and everyone's kind of acting in the way that they think is right. Why did you flee secretly and deceive me and not inform me? And I would have sent you away with joy and songs and tambourine and lyre. And maybe that's true. Maybe that's what Laban would have done. You can certainly doubt him and say, oh, that's not what Laban would have done. He would have tried to deceive Yaakov and get him to stay with this flock. But we don't know. All we can do in those situations is treat the other person in the right way. What should Yaakov have done? Should he have deceived him and run off in secret? No, he should have gone and told him. And then Laban's actions are on Laban's head. We don't get ahead of people and say, oh, if I do that, then they're going to do this. Do the right thing and see what the outcome is, and deal with the outcome as the situation actually transpires, and not according to your own imagination of how things might be if you take certain actions. And you did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters, and now you have been foolish to do this. It is in the power of my hand to do evil to you, but the Elohim of your father spoke to me last night, saying, guard yourself that you do not speak to Yaakov either good or evil. So Laban has objections that I think any one of us would have had in that situation. And maybe he would have acted incorrectly, and maybe he thinks now that he would have, wished them well and sent them on their way, but we don't know. And Yaakov didn't know. The only way that he could know is to do what is right, and then we can leave Yehovah, as we can see here, to deal with other people. We just make sure that we are correct. Yehovah, if he had needed to, could have said to Laban, Yaakov is going to come to you and tell you that he's going back to his land. Do not prevent him. Yehovah's actions are unknown to us, and maybe Yehovah acts in the lives of other people and warns them or guides them onto a different path, and we would never know. When we presume to know, and presume that if we don't act in a way that is wrong, harm will come to us because of it, that doesn't give Yehovah any freedom to act in the way that he wants to in this situation. He's told us what we should do. The best thing that we can do is do that, pray to Yehovah for the rest. So he says, I could do you evil, but I've been told not to speak to you either good or evil. So he's kind of saying, you found yourself in a bit of a situation here, haven't you? I could do you harm. Thankfully, the Elohim of your father came to me and told me not to speak to you good or evil. And now you have gone because you greatly long for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? Now, again, Yaakov is here in this situation. He has limited information. So when Lavan comes to him and says, why did you steal my household gods? Yaakov's instant reaction is going to be, he's falsely accusing me. I haven't stolen his household gods. Lavan only has partial information. When they were there, the household gods were there. When they left, they were gone. So he presumes Yaakov has stolen the household gods. Neither one of them are correct, because neither one of them have the perfect knowledge, the objective knowledge, objective truth that Yehovah has, and the same is true for each one of us when we are dealing with anyone. We can think we know the whole situation, but do we? Of course we don't. We know as much information as we can know. Verse 31 says, and Yaakov answered and said to Lavan, because I was afraid, for I said, lest you tear your daughters away from me. So I imagine that this is true. I don't know whether it's true or not, but Yaakov is acting justifiably. If you can say, well, I can justify the wrongs that I'm doing by this or that, obviously we know that that's not good. But Yaakov has reasons to justify what he has done. Lavan has reasons to justify what he has done. With whomever you find your gods, do not let him live. That's how confident Yaakov is. Because, to his mind, no one has stolen the household gods. So he can say something like that. With whoever you find them, let them die. In the presence of our brothers, see for yourself what is with me and take it with you. For Yaakov did not know that Rachel had stolen them. And Lavan went into Yaakov's tent and into Leah's tent and into the tents of the two female servants, but he did not find them. And he came out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the house idols and put them in the camel's saddle and sat on them, and Lavan searched all about the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, let it not displease my master that I am unable to rise before you, for the way of women is with me. And he searched, but did not find the house idols. And Yaakov was wroth and contended with Lavan. And Yaakov answered and said to Lavan, what is my transgression? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? Again to Lavan, he has reason to pursue Yaakov. To Yaakov, he does not. So Yaakov is annoyed with Lavan, Lavan's annoyed with Yaakov. They're not going to be able to come to an agreement about who's right and who's wrong in this situation. We will see that they do make a covenant with one another, that they won't interfere with one another in their lives, but they have no way of knowing justice in this situation. And Yehovah gives us ways of discerning who is telling the truth, and that people should swear before him and all sorts of things in his mishpatim, in his justices, by which we can come to a conclusion with others, and they put themselves under Yehovah's judgment. Now that you have searched all my goods, what have you found of all your household goods? Set it here before my brothers and your brothers, and let them decide between the two of us. These 20 years I have been with you, your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried their young, and I have not eaten the rams of your sheep. That which was torn by beasts I did not bring to you, I myself bore the loss of it. You required it from my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. And this is another thing that people tend to do. When they have an argument with someone else, they'll come and they'll list all the good that they've done for that person, perhaps not ever mentioning any of the bad that they've done towards them. And they kind of try to justify themselves before them by the things which they have done which are right. And people can be like that with Yahovah as well. They can think, well, okay, I didn't do this, but I spent all my life doing this, and I did this and this and this, and that should afford for me to be declared right before him. That which was torn by beasts I did not bring to you, I myself bore the loss of it. You required it from my hand, whether stolen by day or by night. Thus I was by the day, the heat consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep fled from my eyes. These 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. Unless the Elohim of my father, the Elohim of Abraham, and the fear of Yitzchak had been with me, you would now have sent me away empty-handed. Elohim has seen my affliction and the labour of my hands, and rendered judgment last night. So that's how Yaakov perceives those things when he hears Elohim has warned Lavan not to speak evil to him. He presumes, that's because Lavan would have done evil to him. So really Elohim is with him. He's judged favourably on his side. So he is seeing what Elohim has done, and he is making assumptions about Elohim also, something which we should not do. We have the ability to read these things and to learn from Yaakov's mistakes. And Lavan answered and said to Yaakov, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and this flock is my flock, and all that you see is mine. But what shall I do today to these my daughters, or to their children whom they have borne? And now come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and it shall be a witness between you and me. So when I read this, it kind of makes me think of Lavan perhaps being more mature here in the situation. We certainly know that he is older than Yaakov for sure, although Yaakov is not a young man by this point. But he says, come, let us make a covenant. So Yaakov took a stone and set it up as a standing column. And Yaakov said to his brothers, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there on the heap. And Lavan called it Yagar Sahadutha, which means witness heap in Aramaic. We remember, of course, that Lavan is an Aramaean. He spoke Aramaic. But Yaakov called it Galeed, which also means witness heap. So I don't think that there is conflict here over what to call it. I think it's saying Lavan spoke Aramaic and Yaakov spoke Hebrew. And Lavan said, this heap is a witness between you and me today. That is why its name was called Galeed. Okay, and I think that the reason it says Galeed here is because it is telling us what Lavan said in Hebrew. The passage is written in Hebrew, and it's relating to us what Lavan said. The words that he actually spoke were, he probably called it, whatever it was in Aramaic, Yagar Sahadutha. And he said, this heap is a witness between you and me today. That is why its name was called Yagar Sahadutha. But when that is related in Hebrew, it says Galeed. Just like we see in the Septuagint translation, we see place names and names of people and Hebrew words translated as the meaning of that Hebrew word, rather than a transliteration into Greek. I think that's possibly what we're seeing here. It certainly could be. Also, mitzpah, which means watchtower, because he said, let Yehovah watch between you and me when we are out of each other's sight. If you afflict my daughters, or if you take other wives beside my daughters, although no man is with us, see, Elohim is witness between you and me. So these seem to be the terms, if you like, of their covenant, that Yaakov is not going to take other wives or afflict his daughters, which maybe you think, well, as if Yaakov's going to do that anyway. He's never shown any propensity to do those things, but to Laban, that's how he perceives Yaakov, as a threat that he might do those things. That's why he says, we'll put this here, we'll call it watchtower, and let Yehovah watch each of us to know I'm doing right, and to know that you're not doing things like afflicting my daughters and marrying other women and, you know, whatever else. Let Elohim be witness. And this is the only way, in fact, that we possess, not only a good way, but the only way of us settling conflict that we have with other people. When we have something that we believe, they're saying something else. The only way that we can resolve that conflict is to leave it in Yehovah's hands. And Laban said to Yaakov, see this heap and see this standing column which I have placed between you and me. This heap is a witness, and this standing column is a witness, that I do not pass beyond this heap to you, and you do not pass beyond this heap and this standing column to me for evil. The Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Nahor, and the Elohim of their father judge between us. And Yaakov swore by the fear of his father Yitzchak. So it is Laban that says, may Elohim judge between us, which again I would suggest is a more mature way of resolving the situation. Now, I can't suggest that Laban's this perfect guy or anything, but this way that he suggests of dealing with the situation seems good. That's the only way, in fact, that we can ever resolve disagreements that we might have with other people. We just say, may Yehovah judge between us. That's not saying to them, I am right and you are wrong, and Yehovah is going to prove that. And it's certainly not saying you're right. It's just saying to them, let's leave it in Yehovah's hands. He knows the truth of the situation. He is just, he is righteous. Let's leave it with him. And Yaakov brought an offering on the mountain and called his brothers to eat bread. And they ate bread and spent the night on the mountain. And Laban rose up early in the morning and kissed his sons and daughters and blessed them. And Laban left and returned to his place. And Yaakov went on his way, and the angels of Elohim met him. And when Yaakov saw them, he said, this is the camp of Elohim. And he called the name of that place Machanaim, which that's what that means, the camp of Elohim. So Yaakov has these encounters regularly throughout his life. He has visions of angels here. He meets with angels, and Yehovah speaks to him and tells him, listen, I'm going to be with you. And today we are Yaakov on the earth. We don't know how Yehovah acts on our behalf. We don't know who he warns off, who he guides away from our path, how he protects us. But we have his word that he is with us and that he will lead us to the land. Now, I mentioned at the beginning and I alluded to it a couple of times throughout this, that I would show you a resource by which you can learn more about this Torah portion, and that resource is our website. Some people may not have ever been on our website, might not know what is available to them there. We can see here, if you go to Torah portions, then you will see this screen. If you go to Genesis, Bereshit, you will see this, and then all of the Torah portions that we have ever done. So you would go here to Vayetze, and he went out, and you will see all of the years that we've done this Torah portion before. So that's 7 versions of this Torah portion that we've done previous to this one. Now, it's worth mentioning at this point, because several people have asked for it, that I have spoken with the people who do our web hosting about the possibility of uploading the PowerPoint presentations. So going forward, and maybe we'll go back to some in the past and put them there, but when you go to these Torah portions, you will be able to download the PowerPoint presentation along with watching the Torah portion. That will be useful to some people, and some people have requested that. So that is something that is coming very soon. I recommend you go here, you look at these Torah portions, because they contain a lot more information that I'm able to go over in just a brief potted version of the events. In the second part, we're going to look at a passage from the Torah portion, and we're going to look at what that teaches us and what the rest of Scripture teaches us about what is said there. And I think that it will be of great benefit to you, and is certainly something that, if you can grasp hold of it, will enrich your walk with Yahovah and your understanding of him. We'll come back in the second part.